Hello there. Welcome to episode 3 of Bow and Blade, a podcast brought to you by medievalists.net, where all things medieval come alive. Bow and Blade gives you a seat at the bar as scholars of medieval warfare go beyond the Wikipedia articles to talk about the debates and questions that we're working on today. I'm Michael Livingston, professor at the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina.
And I'm Kelly DeVries, professor of history at Loyola University of Maryland. And I was really stunned to find out that neither of us had won the MacArthur Fellowship for brilliance. At least mine didn't come. I didn't know.
Mine didn't come either. I think they really missed an opportunity there, and I hope one of the voters is listening. Yeah, they really. I also didn't get an Oscar.
No.
Yeah.
And the Nobel still to come, so I'm hoping, hanging on to that one.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Yeah, well, hopefully we'll get there. What are you drinking at the bar tonight, Kelly?
So I had a little bit of a difficulty on this one. Siege of Orléans, of course, Joan of Arc. Some of the devil's side of the shoulder. It wants a flaming tiki torch, and I think that's probably wrong. I probably shouldn't do that. He's pushed me, but the angelic side is going. I think this is the right one. A Virgin Mary.
Well played, sir. Well played. I'm drinking Witch's Brew cocktail. So a little Midori, Cointreau, spot of lemon. Cheers to Halloween and obviously to Joan of Arc, who is my favorite
that is
witch.
The devil's side that's speaking to you, though.
Yes. Oh, she's my favorite witch this side of Glenda the Good, Witch of the North. So yeah, I guess we got it covered, angels and demons, on this episode, because yes, as Kelly said, we are talking about Joan of Arc and the Siege of Orléans. Or maybe I should say we're talking about the Siege of Orléans and therefore talking about Joan of Arc, because one of the things is that Joan wasn't there most of the time. So as ever, we'll kind of start with a basic sort of overview, so that those of you here gathered at the bar can just get a sense of where we're at, Kelly and I, so that then we can just start talking and you can enjoy the scene. So this is the 100 Years' War, and we all know the 100 Years' War is between England and France, and that's probably a good place to start. Kelly, what the hell is France?
Yeah, what the hell is France? Well, in fact, what the hell is the 100 Years' War, the last 116 years? On first of all, I mean, there's so many different questions with the 100 Years' War, of course. We all want to study it. The participants is pretty important. The fact that the Duchy of Burgundy, which is very much a part of France, is actually allied with the English at this point, would suggest that, France is not an entity. In fact, one of the interesting things in the 15th century is France has been in civil war since 1407, pretty much, whereas the English were in peace in 1407. They don't come back into the conflict until 1415. Of course, the very famous attack of Normandy and the Battle of Agincourt, and then the conquest of Normandy, Maine, and the Ile-de-France by Henry V. So France in its own right is not France. And there's two major peoples out there, major groups, some of them that are following the Dauphin and the legitimate throne at this time held by Charles VI and Isabel of Bavaria, who rule France, that do a fairly good job at it, especially because they don't have the English there to pester them, until the Count of Orleans is killed. And the Count of Orleans, Duke of Orleans, is killed in 1407. And it's discovered very soon afterwards that it's the Duke of Burgundy that's done it. So the brother of the King of France, the Duke of Orleans, is killed by the cousin of the King of France, the Duke of Burgundy. And so war begins. And
so Thanksgivings were rough in this family. This is like,
I mean, we want dysfunctional family because King of France is lucid at this moment, but not always. And then there's a question about Isabel of Bavaria and whether she and the Duke of Orléans have been seeing each other. In fact, he's murdered on the streets of Paris coming out of her palace. And
we should do a whole episode on that murder. It is
I mean,
great.
the murder is amazing, and
it's so cool.
And the inquest is kept. The fact that the assassins then get out by
don't give it all away.
Okay, don't give it all away. Anyway,
so we have a civil war.
All up in the arms.
Yeah, so we've got a civil war. Who are the sides in France? What do we call these groups?
Well, Burgundians retain their names because Duke of Burgundy remains always feisty. John of Fearless will even come up with some sort of rationale as why he was able to kill the Duke of Orléans, and so they'll always remain there. The other side would be the Orléanais side, but the Orléans, the sons of the Duke of Orléans, Charles, and then his bastard brother, who will become Lord Dunois, and is known as the bastard of Orléans. They're too young at the point to take over. So the Armagnacs rise to the defense, and that's why the Civil War is always called between the Burgundians and the Armagnacs. The Armagnacs are, and then it splits in 1415 when the Burgundians will actually, after the Battle of Agincourt and Henry coming back in, they'll actually make an alliance with Henry. While and in the peace agreement in 1420, the youngest, the Treaty of Troyes, the last of the last of the sons of the legitimate heir to Charles VI, Charles the Duke, Dunois, Charles the Dauphin, is disowned by Charles and Isabel, and he then goes to seek safety with the Orléanais, with the Armagnacs, and they establish his capital along the Loire River in Chinon Castle, but also in the town of Orléans.
Okay, so we've got England on one side. On the other side, we have France, not France, because it's a France at war with itself. What we would now call France is at war with itself, with two groups, Armagnacs and Burgundians. And the Burgundians are kind of in league with the English, correct?
Okay. Oh, they're very much in league. After, something weirdly happens in 1419 when John the Fearless goes to try to make some sort of peace with the disowned Dauphin, and the Dauphin murders him.
Bloody hell!
So this is, that's your next course of the bad Thanksgiving dysfunctional family aspect. So the son of John the Fearless, Philip the Good, says, screw you, Armagnacs, I'm making an alliance. And he has a direct alliance with the English, which causes Henry to be able to take Paris easily.
A whole bunch of stuff happens here. I mean, this whole period is crazy. And it gets crazier when Henry kicks the bucket, the King of England kicks the bucket. Yeah. That makes things even more complicated. And we can't get into all the politics of this because we do want to talk about Orléans. But really important for everybody to understand that, if you've always thought of the 100 Years' War as England and France as this kind of two totally different entities, it's way more complicated than that, especially on the French side. The English side's pretty consistent. It's like the English, okay? But who's allied with them gets very, very different as we go along.
It is, except for Henry dies before his treaty can go into effect. He dies before Charles does, and so there's no legitimate heir in there, and consequently, the Dauphin rises now again as the heir to the French throne.
What a mess!
And it's supposed to be Henry VI, who's a baby.
What a mess! What a mess!
So it is. It's a mess, and it's also, but let's leave politics out for a moment and go just to the war.
Right on.
Just to the army. France is defeated. Agincourt has absolutely defeated it. Probably comes to be the most decisive battle until Castellone ends the whole thing. There's no question about it. But France is in a defeated state. So it doesn't matter what all these other politics is going on. However, the English, after the death of Henry V, they haven't really been able to do much. So they've sat in Paris, no major military endeavors that could be said to go into Armagnac territory until 1428. And then the Count of Salisbury says, look, I'm going to take the army. And he does it with John, Duke of Bedford, who's in charge of the English forces in France. And he says, look, I'm going to take an army and let's go down to the Loire region and go and just take Loire. And that will then push the Armagnacs into a kind of a grip between Gascony, the South English, and the Loire River. And that way we can take care of the Armagnacs, and this will all be solved fairly soon. And so Salisbury sells this idea. Thomas Montague, Earl of Salisbury, sells this idea to the Duke of Bedford that he will take an army and go south against the Armagnacs. And he sells it on the basis that even though he doesn't have a lot of troops, estimated maybe 10, 15,000 total troops, that he can do this because the Armagnacs are not a solidified group.
And what is the key in terms of fortifications? What is the key target here?
Well, the key target would be Chinon, actually taking the Dauphin. But the symbolic target, and that's always important, especially in warfare, it's never really going after the boss. It's sometimes going after the boss's biggest supporter. Yeah. And that would be, and the symbolic one here is Orléans, because this starts with the Duke of Orléans. That's the leadership. Charles of Orléans has been captured at Agincourt. He's in, and he would be the heir. He's in England, and then the bastard of Orléans is down in Chinon. But Orléans would be the key. They take Orléans, they control the Loire River, and this isn't just them. Until the Hun thought he could control the Loire River by taking Orléans, and he had the similar success.
So, okay, I think it's really important for us to paint a picture here for people that are listening in, because a siege always takes place on a landscape. I mean, so do battles, and we've talked about this before. But here, it's very important to understand where the city of Orléans is positioned relative to the Loire River and the landscape. So can you tell us just briefly kind of what this all looks like, Kelly?
And it's very important. I mean, sieges are fixed locations. You can't draw armies away and have a battle out there and decide the siege, as you could some places, and you can't make a stand in a different location. You have to attack the walls of the city. And we have to talk about walls in Loire, walls along the Loire, because there are several fortified cities along the Loire, but probably none as fortified as Orléans. And we're not just talking about the Roman walls, which are the foundation for all of the medieval walls, but these medieval walls have really been kept up. They've been fortified and refortified. Orléans is perhaps the most wealthy city in the south, and with all the Loire trade that goes up and down, and it's a symbolic city, but it's a large city. It's got a good population and a wealthy population, so they've kept the walls up. They have one bridge entry, and that's it. There are several gates, but these are all have big towers over the top of them. They're very difficult to get to.
So Salisbury is gonna sell this attack on this city, Orléans. As you said, it's incredibly fortified, long time fortified. Really, really great position to hold as a defensive position. It sits on the north bank of the Loire River. And you said there's only one bridge across this thing. What's protecting that bridge?
Well, it's interesting because Salisbury does not choose to attack it from the northern side where the city is, because he would hit these big walls. He chooses to attack on the riverside. So he actually captures Gien and Jargeau up the river, and he captures Beaugency and Meung to the south, so he could cross his army there and then come at the city from the Loire side. One bridge into that city, one huge fortification called Les Tourelles, which means the towers, that protect the bridgehead on the southern bank of the Loire. And it does have a monastery that's in ruins in front of it, because at this time, gunpowder fortifications are also being constructed. Now, not in stone. These are earth and wood fortifications. We call it, the French call them boulevards, and they are not bulwarks. That's a different thing, but that's often how they're translated. They're boulevard. And these are literally earth and wood fortifications with guns and men, and in the case of the English, of course, archers. But no cavalry, no nothing. I mean, it's not a garrison per se. And so Les Tourelles is there, and then the boulevard of Les Tourelles in front of it is there, and then the ruins of the monastery. So Salisbury is coming at that side, and those are really the lead up at that point.
And the
Now, I
Orléans,
think
the Orléans, I assume, like they know they're coming, and they're like, we got to defend Les Tourelles. Like this is the point where we can stop them from getting over.
And there is an argument about whether the boulevard in front of it is built by the English or built by the French. I think it's built by the French. There's a little bit of a mention of it in a couple of the original sources, including the Journal of the Siege. But yes, Tourelle is the big thing, and he that's where he aims. So he arrives in mid-October at the southern banks, and the next day after he arrives, he starts attacking the Tourelle. And he attacks it. It's not a besieging situation where they're going to starve out the garrison. It's an ardent attack.
And it should be said, this isn't always the case. But in the case of Orléans, if you were to go there today, you can actually see some of what Kelly is describing. Much of this landscape is kind of still there, which is pretty cool to be able to actually do this.
Yeah. If the river's low, you can actually see the foundations of the bridge that was the single bridge going in. Now, the Tourelle, there's monuments there to it, of crosses there to the Tourelle. They have excavated it, but you can't see the towers, but they have found the tower base. So we know exactly how big it was. And it was a pretty major fortification. The Orléans know they cannot hold it. And Salisbury knows they cannot hold it. In fact, I think Salisbury expects that he could take the Tourelle and the city surrenders. He's seen the city surrender in Jargeau and Gien, and Beaugency and Meaux. The city has surrendered. So he figures Orléans, he shows force. They're going to say, yeah, we don't really think we've got a chance here. And that's and so here we are. We'll be you.
And so what is the date when he makes this attack?
So he makes an attack on the 12th of October, 12th, 13th of October. I guess he arrives on the 12th, attacks on the 13th, and he takes it on the 18th.
Okay, so he makes quick work of this.
Makes quick work of it. What he doesn't realize is the reason it's quick work is the Orléans don't want to be English. See, the Jargeauois, the Giennois, the Mailers, the Beaugency, I don't know what they are, adjectival and Beaugency. Those guys all surrendered. The armies came up and they said, yeah, we really don't want any destruction, so that's it. What he doesn't realize is the Orléans have no desire to be English. And it's funny because you read the original source, especially this journal that is written during the Siege of Orléans, and written even before Salisbury arrives there, and it says, they say, look, we don't want to be English. That's the fact. We don't want to be English. Everywhere else in France, this is, how many years? 13 years after Agincourt. And everybody's saying, yeah, the French going to give us a break? Are they going to come here? But we got a generation of young people, especially young military people and lesser nobles, who don't really know Agincourt. They can't remember the defeat. And there's a lot that starts seeing Orléans as a symbol. In fact, the journal talks about, that these guys arrive every day. The English can't surround them. They only have 10,000 troops for the entire Loire. So they have picked spots to surround the city. Most of the gates get open for anybody in asunder who shows up. And so we hear of these people who come out of the south, Gascony even, who come out of the south. We hear of them coming out of Brittany. We hear of them coming elsewhere. Orléans becomes a scene of resistance. And why could they resist? And this is what Salisbury doesn't know, is he's been given the Tyrrell, because the Orléans have broken the bridge. They break the bridge while he's fighting ardently for these 5 days to get it. And you know that the English are buzzing because it looks like it's becoming easy work. They're making headway. Fewer and fewer people are there. They think they're running back in the city. In fact, what the Orléans are doing is breaking the bridge. They break it two arches away from the Tyrrell on the other side. They build a little tiny fortification on the other broken end.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as the English get into Tyrrell, they have great celebration. It's said in some sources of winning the Tyrrell, and they look out the back window. Literally, Salisbury looks out the back window. And not only does a new idea enter his skull, when he looks out and sees he does not have the bridge and cannot capture it. Getting Tyrrell does not mean he has the bridge. But at that moment, a gunshot hits the frame, the iron frame of the window he's staring out, and swings down and removes the lower half of his face.
It's brilliant.
It's you couldn't write it.
It's awful. I mean, it's awful. It's awful, terribly, awfully.
Yeah,
but
it's awful.
Also,
actually, he's not killed. The funny thing is, he lingers for like 5 days. They take him down to the headquarters of the English army at Meung, and he sits there in this marvelous castle that's still in place down there. And you can envision that everybody's sitting around going, well, maybe he'll pull through. And they go,
probably not.
Everything's missing from his nose on down,
Yeah.
I don't know whether this one is going to be savable.
Really?
We got good medical people here. Surgeons are saying, we can't put his face back.
Yeah, we can't
do that. This is Humpty Dumpty has fallen. Yeah. Okay, the frame has fallen onto his face. Crack that skull.
This is the 15th century, people. We can't fix that.
No, we can't fix it. We couldn't fix it today, I don't think. I mean, if you get your lower face taken off, it's
bad. And what dumb luck. I mean, is as Kelly said, you can hardly write this sort of thing that he finally gets up there and looks out the window and probably has time to say, oh, and then some sort of expletive in the 15th century, and bam, wham, and that's it.
Yeah. The interesting thing is that there is this legendary guy named Jean Le Couvenier, who is an Orléans. Although they say he's an Orléans from outside the city. I think he comes out from Gascony, and he's an expert shot with a handheld gunpowder weapon. I don't know how you could do that. I mean, it's very, very hard at this point to have any expertise in these guns
without rifling.
But he has that reputation. In fact, he sits in the fortification at the end of the bridge and shoots. Fires bullets. I mean, round bullets at the people who are in the Tyrrell, and he is given credit for this. Now, I've looked at it. The dates don't really come together that he was there at that time, but it's such a great shot. And of course, it doesn't hit Salisbury; it hits the frame. If it hit Salisbury, it wouldn't have caused the damage that a whole iron frame swinging into his face. With the impact of gunshot, it would, but there's some funny legends. I mean, Jean Le Couvenier sits at the end of this bridge, and they're trying to shoot at him with the English archers, longbow, of course, being so accurate and so forth. And they say every once in a while he will feign like he's been shot. So do the old trick where you put an arrow underneath your armpit, and and he gets dragged out, and all the other gunners are weeping at there, and then he gets to a couple of ways away, and the English are all cheering. As soon as he hears the English cheers, he jumps back up and runs to the fortification. And you think, okay, Orléans just don't want to be English.
I mean, so we got this awesome sniper. They're clowning the English here. They're clowning them.
And of course, the other thing is the siege is supposed to work on getting the people mad, and starving, But there's more food coming into the city than there is coming into the English camp.
Right, because
I
again, we
mean,
we can't sort of say this enough. The size of Orléans, on the other side of the river from Littoral, is so big, and the English have so few people they can't surround the damn thing. So you got more reinforcements of men, supply, material, everything you need. The gates are more or less open. It's a really bad siege. Like,
yeah,
can we,
bad
can we
siege.
even call this a siege, Kelly, or is this
Well,
like,
it's called a siege because what do you do with a whole bunch of troops around the outside?
I
The
guess.
English didn't count on it. They get up to the side. They start bombarding the mills along the river. So we know how what a range a gunshot has at this point because it's 230 feet across the river. That's what it is, and we know because the shots can't hit the walls, which are about 5 foot away from the banks of the river. They knock out 7 water mills. So they can hit the river edge. They knock out 7 water mills because we get from the journal that the people are really kind of depressed by this. How are we going to do our wheat? So they make horse mills in the city, and they make 6 of them. So and that does it. So it's kind of even within the journal, they just say, oh, by the way, we got our mills knocked out, so we just build others.
So in the middle of all this, Joan of Arc.
Yeah, well, it's not really even in the middle. Now she hears about it. This is kind of strange because we know Joan has in her mind the siege of Orléans when she approaches the Robert de Baudricourt at Vaucouleurs at the end of 1428. So the siege has only been going on since October.
It might not be the only thing she's got in her mind, Kelly.
Well, she's
Rim
got a
shot.
lot
Can we get a
of
rim
people
shot?
talking.
Anybody? Huh?
Yeah,
No?
she's
Okay.
got a lot of people talking
A
in
lot of
there.
people
There's
talking
no
to her.
question. And evidently, one voice, which she identifies as 2 or 3 of the saints, one voice says to her, "Yeah, we got to raise the siege of Orleans."
Which
And
is a good order to get, right? It's got to
good order
happen.
to get. But consider it, she's doing this in December. She's going to Vaucouleurs in December. That's 2 months after the siege has begun, and really only a month, a little more than a month after it's failed to get into the city that the English are taking Torel. So it's amazing to know that we always consider about how does news go fast. I mean, it's awesomely fast because she's not only in Domremy where she's born, she's behind enemy lines. She's in Burgundian territory. So it gets to her. And, going back to the question, what is France? She has a French nationalistic feel in her revelations. And her voices tell her, go raise the siege of Orleans. So when she goes to Robert de Baudricourt initially, that's her message, is I've got to go and raise the siege of Orleans.
And how old is she at this point?
Well, this is hard to tell because she never
guess.
actually gives her name or gives her name. Name. I mean, in her trial and on her retrial, we don't actually give it a date. It's technically thought that she's 16, 17 at the time, but she could have been as old as 18.
But young regardless.
She's young regardless. And so, of course, Baudricourt throws her out. I mean, she's not gone with her father's permission. He uses that as an excuse not to see her. She's gone with her uncle who knows Robert de Baudricourt. But there's another guy. So Baudricourt is the Castellan of Vaucouleurs. Vaucouleurs is sitting in Burgundian territory, but is French and Armagnac loyal. So even the Burgundians can't take that little tiny walled city there. And if you go to Vaucouleurs, it's puny. But the Burgundians couldn't take it or didn't care to take it. And Domremy, which is just a village 10 kilometers down the road, they don't bother doing anything about either. So she hears of the siege of Orleans, goes to Baudricourt at the end of 1428, and then returns to him in March in 1429.
She wasn't going to take no for an answer.
No one's going to take no for an answer. Well, there's also been a couple things happen. The Burgundians actually come in and raid Domremy, although Joan's family and everybody else is off to safety in the woods. But that must have gotten Baudricourt thinking, maybe this peasant girl's got something here. If the Burgundian are coming down because they hear the rumor that there's a wacko peasant girl down here who thinks that she thinks she can go put the king on the throne, and especially the first mission for her, raise the siege of Orléans. That is the first one. So, the Burgundians, I mean, how did they take it serious? But I think that gets tied in. So she goes back to Baudricourt. He sends her down to René d'Anjou. She passed a couple of tests. And then suddenly in March, she's on her way to visit the Dauphin, who's in Chinon.
And near as we can tell, none of this is normal. This is not sort of like, oh yes, another person who thinks that they hear voices. Please pass them along. But like none of this is normal. All of this is quite remarkable, that she was able to convince this person to get her to that person to convince to get to the next. Like this is a chain at each step is fairly, kind of miraculous that she's managing to do this and convince these people.
Yeah, you can see why people, will look at the story of Joan of Arc, and if they believe in deity, then it's hard to deny deity in the role of her life, because everything falls into play. I mean, you can work outside the line and back to deity and everything, ignoring, of course, that she sees this as a mission. But there are women who are getting missions. This is a time for holy women. You think of all the other 15th century women who are getting there, claiming, even Marjorie Kemp up in England, Bridget of Sweden, a little bit before Catherine of Siena. So there's a lot of holy women at this point in time. So I don't think that was unusual. It is unusual that they don't preach and say, by the way, be good, be best. They're not saying that. And Joan actually meets one of these holy women along the line. She says, well, what's her mission? And the woman says, oh, I'm supposed to be good. I'm supposed to tell everybody to be good. And Joan says, that's not a mission.
Hold my beer. Hold my beer. I got a mission.
Yeah. Joan shows up at Baudricourt and says, yeah, I'm supposed to go lead the army to take Orléans. And Baudricourt, no wonder he sends her back.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no rubber rooms around at this time. There's no mental institutions. Otherwise, I can't imagine the Baudricourt would have said, she needs a few days in there.
And I mean, I hate to harp on this point, but I have to. I adore Joan of Arc. She is so fascinating. It's no wonder so many books that Kelly has written. One of the great books on Joan of Arc, it must be said. Joan of Arc, a military leader. And there's no wonder there's so many books written about her, so many movies about her. She is utterly fascinating, and there's no question. I don't think any question whatsoever. She believed. This is not something she was faking. She wasn't like making a story here. Like she believed, and whether that means it was true, in the sense that as Kelly said, deity was really doing this through her, or she had something else that was making her think this. To some degree, is kind of irrelevant. I mean, the fact on the ground is she believed. And the people around her increasingly believed, and that is a incredible, potent mix that in this case changed history, which is really, really cool. So there's no wonder Joan is amazing. I mean, she really is. So she's heading.
And I've written. It does not matter whether she heard voices. It matters that she believes she heard voices, and the people around her believe they heard voices. And now, very, very interesting historical figure, too, because she's pre-modern, and yet because we have trial transcripts of the trial the year after Orléans when she's captured, 2 years after Orléans, she's captured 1 year, put on trial. We've got those trial transcripts. We also have the fact that Charles the Dauphin, now Charles VII, because he will be put, spoiler alert, he will be put on the throne by Joan, he assembles a rehabilitation trial in the 1450s. And while there are Bedford's dead and Salisbury, of course, is dead, anybody who would have encountered on the English side are either dead or gone. Lord Talbot will reappear in France after this, but not enough to give testimony. But there's a lot of the people who she fought with that are still alive. The Bastard of Orléans, now Lord Dunois, is still alive, and so is the Duc d'Alençon alive. So there's her squires are alive. And so he assembles these people who knew her. And what we have is essentially an oral history of Joan of Arc, of everybody who knew her in this amazing rehabilitation trials. And yeah, it's memory. We have to remember some of these things. Some of the statements are amazing that come out of the people who fought with her and other and people who grew up with her, and even a few of the remaining people from the trial. There's not a lot that want to come over and confess that they burned the saint of Saint Joan, although she won't be made a saint until 1920.
And when you put all this together, of course, you get a fuller picture of a human being than we get from most figures in the Middle Ages, quite frankly. You don't have this kind of multiple perspectives on an individual. You tend to get there's a little description in this chronicle, a little something over here. There is so many people, as Kelly's saying, talking about this woman and what she was like and all that. It's cool. It's cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing to hear the bastard of Orléans, the old guy who was who was trying, the old in 40s, 50s, but he was the guy in charge of Orléans, of taking Orléans, or at least defeating the English, and he hasn't been able to do it. And he was very reluctant to accept Joan in the first place. And, at the end, when they talk when he says this is a deposition, and he just says, look, when I was with her, I didn't want to sin. I mean, the fact that she attracts these individuals, including what will become the greatest pedophilic murderer of all time, Gilles de Rais, will become one of her followers. The way that she's able to attract individuals in a role that is so different from women throughout history. I mean, there's nobody, I tell the students all the time, there's nobody like Joan in the history. There will be nobody like Joan in history.
She's cool.
It just won't. She's just an anomaly, and everything falls into play. And if you don't accept the deity, Christine de Pizan, the greatest female writer in the Middle Ages, she writes a little poem on Joan, the last thing she writes, because she will die before Joan. But Joan is captured at this point, and she even says, "Oh, you stupid English! How can you not believe that God is on her side? She's done everything she said she would."
Yep.
And so you're absolutely right. I mean, first of all, anybody who reads about her is attracted with that same kind of attraction. That, she was something different.
Totally
so
remarkable.
You don't believe in deity. You've got to believe in this uniqueness in history, and that she comes in and changes history.
And she gets there by going to Chinon. So Chinon is where the Dauphin is.
Mm-hmm.
And the Dauphin is at this point the king to be, but hasn't been crowned. That's why he's the Dauphin.
Doesn't look like he's going to be. He can't. I mean,
not looking good.
No, it's not looking good at all. And in fact, he tried. I mean, he doesn't see her for about a week. When she gets there, he knows she's coming. The rumor has come that she's coming down there. In fact, they have to sleep. Her little group of 5 or 6 people who accompany her coming down from Vaucouleurs. Remember, this is all behind enemy lines, and she crosses the river to go, or she goes to Chinon, and then she has to cross the river to a couple of times. Everybody knows she's there, and they have to sleep at night, or they have to walk during the night and sleep during the day to keep out of the way of the Burgundian soldiers. Everybody's, either knows she's coming, or people writing later on, right from Gien, a captured city, and they'll say, "Yeah, we heard this woman was coming, and we were grateful for her to be coming there." The Dauphin knows she's coming. He knows she's there. He doesn't know what to do with her. He puts her through a test where he dresses some courtier in his own clothes and says, well, if she comes and identifies him, then we'll know she's not from God. And of course, what he doesn't count on is Charles VI, or Charles VII, if you see any of the paintings, is truly the ugliest ruler that history has ever known. And, I mean, it's just impossible not to recognize, all they have to say, Joan would say, well, how am I going to recognize the Dauphin? He's the one who stands out being that ugly.
Or also she had an
Or God.
angel whisper. So
Yeah,
either way, she identifies him.
she
He's like,
identifies him.
wow,
Yeah, and then
that's impressive.
tells him a secret.
Yeah, we don't know what it is.
Oh, we actually do.
We don't know what
We actually do know what it is.
We don't know what it is.
Well, her confessor, so the closest guy to her during this period of time, or after this period of time, says that she tells Charles that God wants him to be king.
Which isn't a secret.
Well, no, it probably
Not
isn't.
in his
It would
head.
have been better if she'd said, God knows you've got a wart on your left butt.
Right, that would have worked.
I mean,
better.
that'd be a secret. Renee d'Anjou has her tell him a secret too, and she says, "You better stop stepping on your wife." And Renee said, "I can't believe it. It's probably the worst kept thing in the world down there." And Nancy, that Renee d'Anjou is stepping on his wife. But if you think about it, and we can think about it because we've had a president who needed constant reinforcement, right?
Yeah,
just a constant reinforcement. God wants you to be king.
He had to like that.
That's the greatest secret he could do. God wants to be king. You can bet Charles turned with the biggest smile on his face and looked at the rest of the court. Biggest smile on his face. He probably blurted out, "See, God wants me to be king."
Yeah. He had to be pretty pumped. So,
he had to be pretty pumped. And if I'm Joan, even as a teenage girl, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to meet a powerful man. What do I tell him? I tell him he's the greatest in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in her case, of course, she thinks God is talking through her. Literally, God is giving her messages. And that was one of her missions, was to put Charles on the throne. That's her second mission.
Yeah.
Raise Orléans, put Charles on the throne. So if she's putting Charles on the throne, she knows God wants him. That would be an easy message to say. No big secret, no.
Yeah. So we get high fives all around, and Charles says, "Go for it, right? Go."
No, he's still not quite sure. So he has.
Come on,
to
what does this
send
guy
her down
need? Come on.
Yeah, I know. I mean, if you've been just told the greatest secret in the world, you should know immediately. He sends her to his mother-in-law, Yolande of Aragon. Remember, mom, he can't send her to because she's up in Paris.
Yeah, that's not good.
So he sends her to mother-in-law, Yolande or Aragon, who, by the way, is on exile from Aragon at this point, from Spain at this point, and Navarre, and she checks Joan to make sure she's a virgin, and then he sends her to Poitiers because the University of Poitiers, which had only been founded by professors who've run from Paris, because they want to be Armagnac on the other side of the Civil War. And he sends her there to get their approval. We do not know. We've lost whatever was going on in that testing period, but we know they approved of her, and they send her back and say, yeah, that's true. And even then, she sticks around Chinon Castle for about a month.
Okay.
Because she finally gets to Orléans on April 29th? Is that it?
29th of April. That's right.
Yeah,
29th
of April. So she's in Chinon for roughly, she's in the south of France there for roughly a month and a half, and then she's in Chinon for a month. And you go to Chinon, you can actually see her room where she was at, and you can see. We're told that she practiced riding a horse. She had armor made. Charles had armor made for her, and she wore it, and she had to have it specially made for her because she's smaller than most of the men that armors are made for. You don't take armor off the rack anyway. And she had armor, and it has a painting done of her. So there's a few things in Orléans. At the same time, Yolande of Aragon is building up a force of troops, and also she's putting together a huge amount of food to send to Orléans to help the people inside the city.
And part of this, this issue of virginity, of course, is also why she becomes known as the maid of Orléans.
Maid of Orléans.
Because
she was known as the maid at this point.
Yeah.
So she's not known as Maid of Orléans.
Not yet. She will be.
Yet.
But she's already the maid. And
not with the English collar, by the way.
Obviously, with a religious connotation and connections to the Virgin Mary. Which is why Kelly's drinking what he's drinking here tonight.
I'm not. I'm still sober.
So yeah. All right. So she finally gets there to Orléans, 29th of April. So the siege has been going on. Remember, it started way back on the 12th of October,
Yeah.
the previous year. So it's been going on quite a ways, quite a while. And again, just showing how bad this siege was kind of going for the English. They couldn't prevent her from getting in,
Yeah.
so she makes it in. The
Yes,
city knows she's coming.
well, and in fact, there's a huge French army outside the walls too. So the English so there's a French army that's not doing anything. There's an English army that's not doing much. And then yeah, she rides right past an English garrison in one of these boulevards and into the Cheshire Gate. And she's greeted. I mean, everybody knows. Everybody should have known on the other side of the wall. Everybody inside the wall knows because as soon as she comes in, there's a huge mob that gathers. And the journal says that everybody approaches, they even want to touch her horse. She's already famous and she hasn't done a thing at this point, but they are looking for a savior.
Yeah.
That's and they all these troops are there that have come in, that have flown in, flowed in. La Hare, this big, massive, we called massive everywhere, man who's risen from the ranks into knighthood, and Zanton, and Ponton de Zantre, who's Gascon noble, but doesn't like the English, and he has come into the town, and all of them are approaching her or out in the with the army, but the townspeople, in fact, it gets so close that they say at one point that her banner, because she's had her banner made, her banner catches on fire from one of the torches that the people are holding, because she gets into town at dusk, and she makes this maneuver with the horse that allows the horse's tail to kind of brush the flame out. And so whoever is writing the journal, unfortunately, this amazing account that is clearly a daily account of the siege, although it is later written down and amended by adding the story of Joan into it. That he's so impressed by the fact that she can make that maneuver, and that she's adored by the crowds, and they just love it. They wanted to even touch her horse.
Yeah.
Later on, Pius II, who will write about her, the Pope who will write about her, says, yeah, people just needed to touch her. They just needed to be with her. I mean, that kind of spirituality. I mean, that's what she was selling.
Sure.
So she's a mercenary leader. If you think about it, she's a captain, but instead of booty, she's bringing spiritual booty. She is guaranteeing that they're fighting on the side of God. And what does that mean to a medieval soldier?
Yeah.
What does that mean to a medieval enemy?
Yeah.
Because if English think that God's on her side,
yeah, they can't go for that. Yeah, no, it's got to be witchcraft. This has got to be the devil at work, and that of course is where all this ends up. So 29th of April, she shows up. Crowd goes wild. Crowd goes wild.
She's taken into the mayor's house, allowed to go in there and rest.
Nice. Good work if you can get it.
Good work, you get it.
She's brought more supply, more people.
In fact, even before that, so she's resting that night. The Orléans are so taken, so enthused by her presence, they go out and take that boulevard of English that the French army haven't taken. The militia in the town, the garrison in the town, are now so enthused that she's come that while she's resting, they go out and take one of the boulevards that was watching their gate, and
they're pumped. I mean, Jordan's on the bench, but you're pumped because Jordan's going to come into the game.
Jordan's coming into the game, but Jordan goes rest another one.
Yeah.
So you go out and score 10 points.
Go ahead.
He doesn't come in. Well, and that's seriously it, because she is said to have awakened and said, "The blood of France is flowing. Take me to where the fight is." She gets to this boulevard and is able to be at the end of it when it is captured by the militia in Orléans. And then she goes out and chastises the army military leaders because the Orléans have had to take this. And she goes out and says, what stupidity? Why didn't you join in? And of course, they had no clue it even happened. They've been doing nothing for a couple of months out there. They've been having barbecues or whatever. And, the town peoples go out and take one of the boulevards that they could have attacked anytime they wanted to.
Had to be pretty rough, for these guys,
And for the English too. So Joan is in the town. She's not in there very long. She goes up to the end of that bridge, or the had been broken off by the Orléans.
Yeah,
they're still sitting there. We don't know whether Jean Le Couvenier is at the end or not, but
still
he does
sniping
appear
people.
later on in her army. He appears later on in her army. So when she's after the siege of Orléans, so he must have been attracted as well to her. But she goes to the Tourelle and she yells at the English that God wants them to surrender. And the letter to the English, which it becomes letter, it's really a spoken letter, and then it's written down by in the journal, and it's also written down a couple other places. I mean, she basically says Glasdale. She knows the captain of the English garrison in Tourelle, and she says, "Look, Glasdale, God wants you to surrender. You better surrender, because otherwise, we're going to kick your ass." Now, okay, she's Joan. She's not using those terms. That's a short version. Mike and I have translated the actual letter of the English in our reader. So if you want a good version, it is cool. But it's, you can think there's this teenage girl shaking her fist at the English across the river. It is recorded that they don't actually call her a maid at this point.
It's something
they
not nice.
Do tend to, they're soldiers. They tend to be a little more foul-mouthed, and putain is often how it's translated.
Yeah,
which has various meanings.
Yeah, it's not cool. It's not cool.
No, in fact, she's so taken. She is so upset. It's amazing. She's so upset that they take, and the Bastard of Orléans has come into the town at this time to figure out what is going on with this woman who has showed up, and he has to console her. She could not imagine that the English would not. I mean, it's both. They're very vile. I mean, I think that's but not just the vileness of it. She can't imagine they wouldn't surrender when she tells them that she's there.
Yeah.
And God, she's so confident. And this is one of the things that just rides out this whole experience. So she's only it's only involved in this a year. And that whole year, and even in the trial a year later, the confidence comes through. I mean, she is just so sure God's on her side.
Yeah. Well, in the letter, you can. I mean, it's not even a hint of doubt. That's one of the things that's so beautiful about it. It's just so utterly confident that she has, as Kelly said, I've said this, and therefore you do.
Yeah, you do. And by the way, because I think she's like outside the walls of Jericho. She figures that it's going to fall down if she does. And for the English then to respond, she never doubts. So now she's sure that God wants the English taken out of the picture, because the second part is, God's going to come after you if you don't surrender, and they don't surrender.
Yeah. And
God goes after them.
And God will come after them. So okay. So what is her move now?
Well, she rides back out to the camp with Dunois and with some of the citizens of Orléans, and it's in the evening, and she goes off to her quarters. They set up a quarters. We do know that her squire Jean Dallon tells us later that she's with the soldiers. Apart from the soldiers, she dresses. In fact, one of the real interesting things is the depiction of the nudity of Joan that comes up in the trial as well. Look, she's a witch, because none of the soldiers are affected by this, and then later will be used as in the rehabilitation trial to prove how pure she was. That none of the soldiers. This is why the Duke of Orleans says, "Oh, I saw she was nude, and I saw she was fair," meaning beautiful, and he says, "But I was not did not affect me, and this is how I know." She truly was what she said she was.
Yeah.
I did not want to sin. That was his comments. But she's close enough, but she is not still accepted by the leadership of the French army. Remember, these guys are all nobles. D'Alençon is a cousin to the king. He's been with the king. Gilles de Rais is a marshal, and he's been with the king. I don't know that he's there yet. He may appear the next day. He's an odd character, and becomes such a vile individual
monster,
himself.
Yeah. But they're all men.
They're all men.
They're all
nobles.
rich. They're all well connected.
Orla here, like, is risen from the ranks. They're all veterans. Ponton de Saint-Tré, maybe this teenage bushy-tailed young teenager, but his father is a famous French fighter. So there's this is the old crusty guys, and they're not old. The Bastard of Orleans maybe like 23, so he's really not that old, but he's got the rank. He is the Count of Orléans, even though he's a bastard because his brother is over in England still captured.
So do you think they were threatened?
So they don't include him. They don't include her.
Was it because they were threatened by her?
No, I don't think so. I don't think they even occurred that was why she was there. I think they thought she was a mascot, really. I think they thought she was going to be there just to show out. I mean, they didn't expect a woman to fight. I mean, that would be crazy. And it's not because there was prohibitions to it. It's just, although the English kept saying later on, oh, well, women are prohibited to fight. And you go, no, they're not. God, half the women whose husbands are away are having to defend their castles. That's not happening. So, but they don't expect it. I mean, there's no woman who's going to fight. Plus, she's a peasant. They don't know how good her skills are. She's only been learning them recently. She hasn't shown much of it. Duke d'Alençon has seen him, so he may report something. But she's left out of the planning sessions for the attack next day. But they do think that they should attack next day. Yeah, she hears this.
And
walks to them. And as bold could be. This is confidence again, right? Walks into the engagement. And both d'Alençon and Dunois will say this later on. The bastard will say this later on. They'll say, she walked into that council and said, if you ever exclude me, I will have your heads. She tells the noble leaders of the armies of France, I will have your heads. And you know what Dunois' comment was in his deposition? He says, I have no doubt she would have. And so she says, look, we're going to take the Tourelle Boulevard on tomorrow. And now remember, this is the French army that has not seen a lot of successes.
Right.
And certainly in 13 years. And the last time they fought in large numbers of any side, they didn't do very well. In fact, every consequential battle in between, they haven't done very well. They've lost, and they're scared to death to lose numbers. They don't have many anyway. I mean, if Salisbury's army is 10,000 down there, there's maybe 6,000 to 8,000 there. I mean, Joan shows up with a few hundred from Yolande of Aragon, and there's maybe a few hundred that have come. But this is not a large army they've got, and they can't afford to lose. And an attack on even an earthen fortification is deadly.
Yeah.
It's going to nail the troops, and they don't want that to happen.
But Joan said,
look, well, okay, think of it. If God's on your side, any soldier that dies on your side goes to heaven.
Straight to heaven. I mean, this is...
So Joan, what's death to her if they're fighting on her side? It means they go straight to heaven. And she tells them that.
Yeah, winner, chicken dinner. This is great.
Yeah, oh, geez. I mean, now, it's funny because later on, after the Siege of Orléans, she will come across a wounded English soldier, and she'll actually get down and try to give him last rites. She can't officially do it, but tries to give him last rites, tries to comfort him, tries to get him to convert because he's fought against her, so he's going to hell.
He's going to go to hell. It's...
Right.
The passion she's got is so good. So good.
It's not just her. So the leaders may not believe this. She walks out and says, we're going to go do a direct attack on the Boulevard of Tourelle. And all the men say, okay, let's go.
After all these months.
One of them saying, hold on here, lady. Are you certain about this? No, we're going. That's it. In fact, she says there's tons that took ladders, put them on the side. She says, I was first up, holding my banner. And they attacked the Boulevard of Tourelle. And they don't quite take it. I mean, it is a fierce fight because you can imagine you're attacking a fortified position with troops that don't have a lot of archery, don't have it. they can't fight until they get on top.
And the
And
English have
there's a
held it for
lot
quite
of
some
archers.
time.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah. So they're ready and waiting.
She gets wounded.
Now, what do we know about the wound?
Wow. Well, we actually know where it is. In fact, it's similar place to where Richard Lionheart gets his wound. So she's a little smarter, or at least the people around her are a little smarter. She doesn't wander around saying nothing's going to happen to me. I'm Richard the Lionheart, and then die of gangrene 5 days later. She actually is pulled off, but she's disabled. She's actually taken away, and there is some question. So an arrow has lodged, or a crossbow bolt, they're not, there's varying things in the record, has hit her between the shoulder and the neck.
Okay.
And so it's not probably a terrible wound, at least not in the thought of something that's going to kill her quickly, but it's not going to be recoverable from, at least, okay, for a normal person, it's not going to be recoverable from.
Not quickly, anyway. Not quickly, anyway.
No, she's taken on a litter back to the camp, and the attack immediately stops.
Yeah,
immediately stops, and won't go on for the rest of the day. So the English are celebrating. They've defeated the witch. The French are mourning, and the probably leadership is saying, well, maybe she was too good to be true.
But it is amazing how immediate this effect is.
Yeah.
That when she's wounded and pulled from the field, like, it just stops. Yeah. That they quickly know, and everything's in a holding pattern. Now, unfortunately for the English,
morning comes.
Morning arrives.
Yeah. And with morning pops Joan up. Everybody says they had no clue. She gets up. She's still bandaged up all over her shoulder. She gets up and looks around and goes, so why'd you stop?
Why'd you stop? I mean,
it's amazing that to see her position in this, but then also to see that she is so every once in a while I get asked, okay, is Joan really that effective with soldier? And I go, yeah, if you get wounded and everything stops, I mean, if the Bastards of Orleans get wounded, they take him off. Somebody comes in his place, and half the people say, who was that? Who was that young man over there that just got an arrow in his eye? They don't really know. They don't really care about that. Joan of Arc, I mean, she's a woman, first of all. She's out there in this great armor. She's carrying a banner, although some say that she was also using a weapon, but she's carrying a banner that's got Jesus and Mary on it. And I mean, it's flowing, it's white, we know. In fact, that when the record gets to that Orléans has fallen, gets to Paris, we get this doodle made by Clement de Fauconberg, who's the kind of the notary of the Parlement of Paris, and it gets announced there. And he draws this woman in a long hair and a skirt and a sword and a banner. That's all he knows.
That's what he knows.
There.
That's
so
what he knows.
They know, and immediately stops. So how effective it was? If you could get the troops stop, if the troops stop when you're wounded, that's pretty effective, especially if they start up again when you're not. And guess who goes with her? And it takes no time at all. I mean, at that point, the English have got to say, "Oh, we may have backed the wrong horse here."
Yeah, we got a problem.
Yeah. This is the time where if you have a plethora of deities, you could say, "Oh, my God, sleep." My God is asleep because, geez, her God's really doing well.
Hers is doing well. Yeah, she pops up right as rain.
Right as rain. Literally looks around. Why'd you stop?
Why'd you stop? We go in now.
Yeah. And they do. They take it. And not only do they take the boulevard, once the boulevard falls, the Tourelle itself, I mean, there's not a lot of men in there anyway. Many of them are trying to get away. I mean, in fact, Glasdale will try to jump into the river and drown. It falls too. So literally 2 days. The French army's been sitting out there not doing anything. Joan shows up, 2 days. Tourelle's done. Orléans saved. All the English troops abandoned. They go to Meung and literally just get the hell out of Dodge, because Dodge is now owned by the Earps.
Yeah, it is.
I've lost the metaphor there.
Yeah, we got a Western reference there. Kelly and I are both Western boys. Yeah, I mean she shows up on the 29th of April. The siege of Orleans, technically sort of ends on the 8th of May. It's basically over before then. But
Yeah.
this is after all these months. She shows up, and as Kelly said, she says, I'm gonna lift the siege of Orleans. So I'll just check that box, and she does.
Yeah.
And then she's like, so I'm gonna go crown the Dauphin king,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
she
Well, in
does.
fact, the
Um,
reason it's marked to the end of May 8th of May is that the English do try to make they try to come back with an army, and they go there and they're sitting on
and
the
they,
field. Now we got a real battle because the French are on the other side, and then the English turn around and leave, and so that
yeah,
indicates they're not going to go there. Joan goes. The strange thing is, Orleans is saved. She goes and spends a couple nights there. She prays, of course, in the cathedral. Has to give her thanks, which is appropriate. Everybody is amazed at her and all. And then she goes back to Chinon for a month. There's no fighting again to relieve the rest of the cities. And then she comes out and in a week gets Jargeau, Meung, Beaugency, and the retreating English are attacked at Patay with their ambush is foiled at Patay. And the English are no longer on the Loire at all. They are gone.
it's absolutely brilliant. And that month where she's in Chinon, I mean, we've got to think a large part of that is her still recovering, actually.
Yeah, yeah,
From the
yeah,
wound. Because even though it by all means had not been fatal, it's still, that's a bad wound to take, especially in 1429.
yeah, yeah.
So it probably did take her quite some time, but absolutely incredible that she manages all this.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, well, or miraculous,
oh, well, yeah,
incredible, and
miraculous.
miraculous.
Yeah,
This is the problem. I mean, the rest of the story of Joan we can cover at another time. I mean, it's
yeah,
fascinating
yeah. We'll need to.
because she does get this coronation army, as I call it, that gets really big. Arthur de Richemont, who's on the out, but had been the great fighter at the end of the 14th, beginning of the 15th century. He shows up from Brittany with an army, and the nobles won't fight with him. And Joan goes up and says, I'll take anybody. I'm going to take anybody. If you're here for France. So this is why we know there's a French nationalism. She says, if you're here for France, then join on up. And Arthur de Richemont joins up at Beaugency, and he's with the entire army. And they go off and then crown the king. Does her second mission right there. In fact, there's no resistance. They go up. They almost have some resistance in Troy. They have to fill the moat, get ready to attack the fortifications, and the Burgundians who are in the city kind of shrink away. So yeah, she goes and crowns the king at Reims, which is deep in English and Burgundian territory.
And this, she had said in that letter that is in the Medieval Warfare Reader that Kelly and I edited, pages 139 and 140. We have that letter, and in that letter, this is what she says she's gonna do,
Yeah, yeah,
and she does it. It
yeah,
is so incredible to read. And again, she's just like, and you English, she's when she's addressing it, you who call yourself regents of France, it's that wonderful, like, I'm not even going to address you by that title, like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
as you term yourself, and yeah, she does it,
Oh, she does. I mean,
pretty amazing. The
you do
maiden of
have to.
Orleans, or the maid of Orleans, excuse me.
Maid of Orleans at that point, yes.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of sympathize with Christina Pazan. Oh, you stupid English.
You idiots, you idiots.
I mean, how could you not think she's come from? Now, it is interesting that once she is burned, and that's a spoiler alert, she will get burned within the next, in the next couple of years. But she's
Yeah.
captured in 1420 or 1430, and then she's burned in 1431. When she's after she's burned, the English send a letter out to all the areas that said, "We got the witch."
Yeah.
So they're desperate to prove she's a witch. And the Burgundians really quite interesting because the Burgundians don't fight her; they capture her. They never fought her down the Loire, so they can't figure out what the English are scared of. But it's very clear the English are petrified, and they're petrified because not of this little peasant girl, they're petrified of what she is,
Yeah, what she represents.
what she represents. Because if God is on the French side, And every indication from that year of Joan's military experience, especially those few months on the Loire, is that God's on the French side, and that says
Yeah.
he's not on the side of
Yeah.
the English. So they got to condemn her as a witch. They got to prove she's heretical.
And it's helpful too. I mean, how do you explain her defeating you? I mean, it just she was a witch.
Mhm.
It was witchcraft. It helps on both sides of this
Well,
for them.
because you teach Shakespeare, that even by Shakespeare's time, and he has Henry the Sixth part one, and it comes out, and Henry the Sixth part one, and Joan is introduced, and he still is having trouble. Still is having trouble in recognizing how the English army lost. This is the English army that he had put in Henry V with this great,
Yeah.
great victory at Agincourt, and he
And the
has to
brother's speech
explain
is so
her.
good.
Even when we get to Bernard Shaw, who writes the poem, writes the play in the 20th century, and just read the preface. Don't worry about the play. Just read the preface in there, because he's taking it all as, geez, look at what Joan did to the English.
Yeah.
Maybe the Irish can do that to the English too. So she becomes this symbol. I mean,
Absolutely.
even after World War One,
Yeah.
the French need to be recognized. The Pope says, "Okay, who do we make a saint? We will make Joan of Arc a saint." And you
Saint
got to
Joan.
think there's some English cardinal going, we
Yeah.
burned her.
Yeah. We are bad.
We're the one who martyred her. We
Our
won't make her a saint as a martyr. We'll make her a saint as a virgin. Of
Yeah.
course, the French, every monument has flames around her and everything else. So I always have to remind my Jesuit colleagues at Loyola University that, I wrote a book on a saint, but it was the saint that was made a saint by the Catholic Church
Yeah.
after they had condemned her as a heretic and burned
Yeah.
her. And they always say, we weren't founded until the 16th century.
Yeah. Well played, Jesuits.
Wasn't our fault.
Yeah. Way to sidestep that one. Look at they're they're starting to flash the lights at us.
They are.
So
They
yeah,
are.
I always want to
I
ask.
think we've cleared the bar out. Or this gathering around us really likes Joan.
What's the one piece of information you wish you most had when it comes to the Siege of Orleans?
Well, a picture of Joan would be nice. I mean, we know that she had three portraits taken, done of her. There's no contemporary picture. The one drawn by Falkenberg is the only one that's done at the time, and he didn't see her. So she's in a dress and long hair. We know she didn't have long hair that would have gotten in her helmet, and she wasn't wearing a dress. I think the one thing we've got a lot of information. We can really decipher what was it. It would have just been amazing to meet her. I mean, and I would have been condemned. Let's face it. I would have been condemned as a heretic and whatever else there.
Yeah.
Even if I adored her. And I do adore her. I mean, there's just no question. There's the traction of Joan of Arc as a historical character. My heavens. It's just amazing. But I would have just wanted to meet her. Just to find out, just to hear. I know she was a convert. I know she had this confidence. Just to be in her presence. I mean, it's true. Maybe Dunois is right. I mean, whenever I was with her, I couldn't sin.
Yeah.
And that would be an interesting feeling. I mean, that might be the conversion feeling. I don't know, but it would be fascinating just to be in presence. So I know it's not. It's an artifact. I want her. I want a relic, one living relic.
One living relic. You're not the only one, Kelly. I think anybody who studies Joan of Arc, I mean, this is the thing, that you see in the sources. You see it again and again and again. Is the feeling, but feelings don't survive, right? They're not. That's not an artifact that we can have. We can sense the feeling, right? We can see around its effects.
Yeah.
But to actually experience that feeling, that is a human emotion, something you can only really kind of do there. And it's the one thing where we don't have, but we know it existed.
We're historians. We're supposed to be cynical, right? We're supposed to be doubtful. We're supposed to ask questions. I dare anybody to read Joan's story, to get into the sources. Don't read other people. Don't read my book. Get into the sources and read them. They're not all translated. If you can read the French, it's edited. But just read the sources and then try to become cynical.
Yeah.
Try to say no. She didn't do anything special.
Yeah.
That I think is the real truth about any. I mean, you could like others. I mean, you know, you can admire even bad guys in history. You can admire whatever. This is the one person I think more than anybody, maybe St. Francis, where you can say, geez, I'd like to meet them, because that feeling,
Mm-hmm.
just being there would
Yeah.
would mean something to me, even if it meant that I now doubted her because the sources were all blown out of proportion and everything. I still wanted that.
Yeah.
What about you?
I was just gonna say, I don't think the sources would be blown out of proportion. I mean,
Yeah.
You know, when you read the sources, as Kelly said, I just can't conceive of them being that far out of whack. It just,
No.
she had to be that amazing. And yeah, how cool would that be? You know?
And she knew, I mean, I think she knew she was going to die. I think she thought this was what was going to happen was Mark. Maybe not. Maybe she figured she could go in the French army and kick the English out and everything else. But she was prepared to die.
She was prepared to die. I think that's
she
right.
did try to escape. And there's a lot of things about you know, we could get into her life outside of Orléans. And there's some people say, well, look, she, you know, she signed an abjuration where she denied everything. And there's true. And but everybody has faults. The fact is that when she finally got, I think she was sleep deprived. And when she finally got sleep, finally got other things, then she determined, yeah, no, there's no escaping this. I cannot deny what I did. I cannot deny my belief in deity. And if I believe that anybody who dies with me is going to go to heaven, then I will too. And so she walked out and she puts on men's clothing. That's what tells them that she's back as a heretic, and she walks right out to the pyre. That's it.
Well, it's been a fine conversation, my friend. Always good to talk to you. The bar's closed, folks. But we hope that you can join us for our next episode of Bow and Blade, when we'll be talking about the first siege of Rhodes in 1480. We're gonna go to the entire opposite end of Europe and talk about something that's quite extraordinary, that if you've not heard about, you're going to have a hell of a good time.
And religion plays a role there too.
It sure does. It sure does.
We've got the Knights of the Hospital.
The Knights Hospitaller, and they're fun. So please do join us. This podcast is sponsored by medievalists.net. So the best way to support us, to support this, other than obviously buying our books, like Kelly's wonderful book on Joan of Arc, is to join their Patreon. So you'll get some swell offers and other goodies. Please visit patreon.com/medievalists. Thank you and have a good time.
Bye.